The crystal palace of Queen Zixthara sparkled in the morning light of three suns. The Velnari homeworld was a place of beauty that few species in the galaxy could match. Towers of living crystal grew from the ground like trees, their surfaces changing color with the emotions of those who lived within them. Today, they glowed with soft pink and gold, showing the happiness that filled the palace. Princess Kiralin stood on her balcony, looking out at the celebration below. Tomorrow would be her coming-of-age ceremony, when she would officially become an adult of the Velnari people. Her skin shimmered with natural iridescence, shifting from blue to silver as her excitement grew. She had trained for this day her entire life. "My daughter," Queen Zixthara's voice echoed in Kiralin's mind, through their telepathic connection. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Kiralin smiled and sent back her thoughts without speaking. "Yes, Mother. I can feel the ancestors preparing to welcome me into adulthood." The crystal spirits sing of celebration. The Velnari were an ancient race, older than most civilizations in the galaxy. They had mastered the arts of the mind thousands of years before other species learned to make fire. Their technology grew from living crystal that responded to thought. Their cities were works of art that could reshape themselves based on the needs of their people. But most importantly, they were peaceful. The Velnari had not fought a war in over 2,000 years. Their telepathic abilities let them understand the feelings and intentions of others, making conflict rare. When disagreements happened, they talked through them with minds connected, sharing emotions and thoughts, until they found solutions that worked for everyone. This peaceful nature made them completely unprepared for what came next. The sky above the palace suddenly turned dark. Not the gentle darkness of night, but an ugly black that seemed to eat the light of the three suns. The crystal towers began to vibrate, their colors shifting to warning reds and purples. Queen Zixthara felt it first through her connection to the planetary consciousness. Terror, raw, animal fear from thousands of minds at once. But not Velnari minds. These thoughts were alien, hungry, and completely wrong. "Mother." Kiralin's mental voice was filled with panic as she watched massive shapes descend from the black clouds. They looked like enormous insects. But wrong somehow. Their bodies seemed to be made of metal and flesh fused together. As they moved, reality around them seemed to bend and twist. The Blight Swarm had found the Velnari homeworld. The first bioships landed in the city center, crushing crystal buildings under their weight. From their bellies poured creatures that the Velnari had only heard about in ancient warnings. The Blight were parasites that fed on the life force of sentient beings. They moved from world to world, consuming everything with a mind until nothing was left but empty husks. Queen Zixthara tried to reach out with her telepathic abilities to understand what the creatures wanted. Perhaps they could negotiate, find some peaceful solution, but when her mind touched theirs, she screamed. The Blight had no individual thoughts. They were a hive mind, but not like any the Velnari understood. This was a mind made of hunger, pain, and endless consuming need. Worse, they were completely immune to telepathic influence. The Velnari's greatest strength was useless against them. "All citizens, retreat to the emergency shelters." Queen Zixthara broadcast her thoughts across the planet. "The crystal barriers will protect you, but the crystal barriers, designed to stop energy weapons and natural disasters, meant nothing to creatures that could phase in and out of normal reality." The Blight warriors moved through solid walls like they were made of air. They grabbed Velnari civilians with claws that glowed with evil energy, draining their life force in seconds. Kiralin watched in horror as her people fell. The brave Velnari guards tried to fight back with their crystal weapons. But the beams of pure thought energy passed right through the Blight creatures. Some guards tried to use their telepathic abilities to confuse the attackers, but the alien minds were too different, too wrong to affect. "Kiralin, run!" Queen Zixthara's mental voice was desperate. "Get to the deep shelters. I'll hold them off." But it was too late. A Blight harvester, larger than the others and covered in metal spines, smashed through the palace wall. Its many eyes focused on Kiralin, and she felt something terrible happen. The creature looked into her mind and tasted her psychic energy. She could sense its satisfaction. Young Velnari royalty had the purest, strongest life force of all. The harvester moved faster than anything that large should be able to move. Kirillin tried to run, but tentacles of living metal wrapped around her arms and legs. She screamed, both out loud and with her mind, as the creature began to drain her energy. Queen Zixthera felt her daughter's pain and terror through their bond. With a cry of rage that shattered crystal windows across the planet, she unleashed every bit of her telepathic power. For a moment, the attacking creatures slowed, stunned by the force of a mother's fury. But it was not enough. The Blight Harvester, carrying Kirillin, began to retreat toward its bioship. Other creatures followed, carrying dozens of captured Velnari. The princess could only watch helplessly as her beautiful homeworld grew smaller below her. The bioship that held her was a thing of nightmares. Its walls were made of flesh and metal fused together, pulsing with an alien heartbeat. Strange tubes filled with glowing liquid ran along the ceiling. In the distance, she could hear the screams of other prisoners. As the ship lifted off into space, Kirillin reached out with her mind one last time to her mother. "I love you, mother. Don't try to follow me. This is beyond our power to fight." Queen Zixthera's response came back weak but determined. "I will find a way, my daughter. Somehow, I will bring you home." The bioship entered hyperspace, heading for the dead zone between galaxies where no rescue had ever been attempted. As the stars disappeared into the twisted non-space of the Blight Realm, Kirillin felt her hope begin to fade. She had no way of knowing that somewhere in the galaxy, a human warrior would soon hear her mother's desperate plea for help, and unlike every other species that would be asked, he would not consider the mission impossible. He would consider it necessary. Captain Marcus Chen sat in the corner of Murphy's Bar, the greasiest dive on Station Omega 7. The place stank of engine oil and cheap alcohol, but it was the kind of place where a man could drink alone without anyone asking questions. Marcus preferred it that way. His latest mission had gone sideways when the client decided humans were too primitive to handle the job. 3 months of planning down the drain because some alien bureaucrat thought humans couldn't be trusted with advanced technology. It was the same story everywhere humans went in the galaxy. Too young, too violent, too unpredictable. "Another whiskey, Captain?" The bartender was a Zorinian with 4 arms and scales that changed color when he was nervous. Right now, they were shifting between yellow and green, which meant he was worried about the drunk human in his establishment. "Just leave the bottle," Marcus said without looking up. The bar's communication system suddenly came to life with an urgent transmission. Marcus ignored it at first. Emergency calls were common on Omega 7, and they usually meant someone wanted humans to do dangerous work for cheap pay. But this transmission was different. It was coming through diplomatic channels, broadcast to every species in the galaxy. "This is Queen Zixthera of the Velnari Empire." The translated voice was clearly filled with grief. "My daughter, Princess Kirillin, has been taken by the Blight Swarm into the dead zone. I offer our most precious psychic enhancement crystals to anyone who can bring her home safely." Marcus looked up. The Velnari were one of the older, more respected species in the galaxy. For their queen to make such a public plea, things had to be desperate. Psychic enhancement crystals were worth more than most planetary economies. "But the dead zone, poor aliens," the Zorinian bartender said, his scales now solid blue with sadness. "Everyone knows nothing comes back from the dead zone. The Blight take prisoners there to feed their young. It's been tried before. The Nexus Guild sent their best warriors 20 years ago. The Crystalline Brotherhood sent a whole fleet 30 years before that, all lost." Marcus downed his whiskey and stood up. "Got a comm terminal I can use?" "Sure, Captain, but if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, you should know that every major species has already declined. The Galactic Council called it a suicide mission. Even the Nexus Guild said it was impossible. Good thing I'm not in the Galactic Council then." Marcus made his way to the communication terminal and opened a secure channel to Earth Command. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Admiral Sarah Rodriguez, his former commanding officer. She looked tired, as she always did these days. Running humanity's military while trying to earn respect from alien species was an exhausting job. "Marcus, please tell me you're not calling about that Velnari princess. We already got the official request through diplomatic channels. The answer is no. Why not? Because it's suicide. The dead zone is exactly what it sounds like. Nothing lives there. The psychic radiation would kill our pilots before they got halfway to the blight nest. Our ships aren't designed for that kind of environment. Marcus leaned forward. What about the stealth frigate project? The one with the radiation shielding? Admiral Rodriguez's expression grew stern. The Defiance Times is an experimental prototype. We've run exactly 3 test flights, and 2 of them nearly killed the test pilots. Besides, it's designed for reconnaissance, not assault missions in hostile space. But it could survive the journey. Theoretically. Marcus, I know that look. You're not seriously considering this. Someone has to. No, they don't. This isn't our fight. The Velnari have never offered humans anything but polite dismissal. They think we're barbarians, who happen to stumble into space travel. Why should we risk our people for them? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Because a kid is in trouble. And we might be the only ones crazy enough to try to help her. Crazy being the key word. The answer is no, Captain. That's an order. The transmission ended, leaving Marcus staring at a blank screen. He sat in the dim light of the bar, thinking. The Admiral was right about almost everything. It was a suicide mission. The Velnari had never shown humans any particular respect, and the Defiance Times was an experimental ship that could kill him just as easily as the dead zone could. But a princess was out there, probably scared and alone, being slowly drained of life by creatures that existed only to consume. And everyone else had given up on her. Marcus made another call, this time to his old squad mate Tony Ramirez, who worked in the experimental shipyard where the Defiance Times was being built. Marcus, what's up? Haven't heard from you since the Centauri job. I need a favor, Tony. A big one. How big? I need to borrow a prototype starship. Tony was quiet for so long that Marcus thought the connection had been lost. Finally, he spoke. You mean steal a prototype starship? Borrow. I'll bring it back. Marcus, what's this about? Marcus told him about the princess, the dead zone, and the mission everyone said was impossible. When he finished, Tony sighed heavily. You know this is insane, right? The Defiance Times hasn't even finished testing. Half the systems could fail the moment you enter hyperspace, and that's assuming you don't get caught stealing it. Will you help me? Another long pause. The ship is in Bay 94. Security shift change happens at 0300. The experimental AI is already installed, but it's programmed to follow safety protocols. It'll try to talk you out of this. Thanks, Tony. Marcus? Bring that girl home. At exactly 0300 hours, Marcus slipped into Bay 94. The Defiance Times was beautiful, in a deadly way. Unlike the bulky, practical ships humans usually built, this one was sleek and dark, designed to slip through space unseen. Its hull was covered in experimental materials that could bend light and energy around it. He climbed aboard and activated the AI system. A holographic woman appeared, her expression already disapproving. Good evening, Captain Chen. I am Arya, the Autonomous Reconnaissance Intelligence Assistant. I must inform you that this ship has not been cleared for active missions. Emergency override. Authorization Chen 7 Alpha. Authorization accepted. But I feel obliged to point out that our destination appears to be the dead zone, which has a 0% survival rate for all previous missions. Marcus strapped himself into the pilot's seat and began the launch sequence. Arya. What's the difference between 0% and impossible? I fail to see the distinction in this context. 0% means it hasn't been done yet. Impossible means it can't be done. We're humans. We specialize in doing things that haven't been done yet. The Defiance Times lifted silently from the bay and slipped into hyperspace before station security even knew it was gone. As the stars stretched into lines outside the viewports, Arya's hologram flickered with what might have been concern. Captain, may I ask why you're attempting this mission? Marcus checked the navigation computer. They had a long journey ahead of them, through several galaxy sectors, and into the void where space itself became strange and hostile. Because someone's got to, Arya. And because sometimes the right thing to do and the smart thing to do aren't the same thing. And you believe this is the right thing? Marcus looked out at the stars rushing past. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of known space, a young alien princess was fighting to stay alive. Everyone else had given up on her. Every military force, every government, every species in the galaxy had decided she was already dead. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. The ship continued its journey toward the edge of space, carrying the only rescue mission that would ever be attempted. It was crewed by one human who didn't know how to quit, guided by an AI who calculated their chances of success in negative numbers, and powered by the kind of stubborn determination that had carried humans from cave paintings to starships. Behind them, Admiral Rodriguez discovered the missing ship and the note Marcus had left. It was short and to the point. Some things are worth doing even when you can't win. Tell my family I tried. Ahead of them lay the dead zone, and somewhere in its twisted depths, a princess who was about to learn that humans had a very different definition of impossible than the rest of the galaxy. The dead zone was worse than anything Marcus had imagined. 3 days into the journey, the Defiance times crossed the boundary between normal space and the void between galaxies. Immediately, every instrument on the ship began giving different readings. The navigation computer showed they were in 17 different locations at once. The radiation detectors registered levels that should have killed Marcus instantly. Then dropped to 0, then spiked again. Captain, I am detecting massive psychic interference, Arya reported, her holographic form flickering like a broken television. The local space-time appears to be. Marcus looked out the viewports and saw what she meant. Space itself looked wrong. Stars that should have been millions of years dead still burned with sick green light. Derelict ships from dozens of different species floated in the void. Their hulls twisted into impossible shapes. Some of the wrecks appeared to be moving, even though their engines were clearly destroyed. How are we still alive? Arya, the experimental shielding appears to be functioning, but I'm reading massive strain on all systems. Captain, I strongly recommend we turn back. The psychological effects of prolonged exposure to this environment are well documented. The crew of the last expedition was found after their ship drifted back into normal space. They had all gone insane and killed each other. How long before the shielding fails? At current degradation rates, approximately 18 hours. Marcus checked his scanners. They had detected several massive energy signatures deeper in the dead zone, any one of which could be the Blight Nest ship. Then we better work fast. As they traveled deeper, the effects of the zone became more apparent. Marcus began seeing things that weren't there. His dead squad mates from the war appeared in the corridor, silently staring at him. His childhood home materialized outside the viewports, complete with his mother calling him in for dinner. Arya, are you seeing this? Seeing what, Captain? My sensors detect no physical anomalies in your vicinity. The hallucinations were getting stronger. Marcus recognized them as a symptom of psychic radiation exposure. Other species, with their more developed mental abilities, would have been driven completely insane by now. But human minds, evolved from ancestors who had survived ice ages and predators, and every natural disaster Earth could throw at them, were built to compartmentalize and push through trauma. Marcus did what his drill sergeant had taught him 20 years ago. He acknowledged the fear, accepted it, and kept moving forward anyway. All right, brain, he said out loud. I know you're trying to protect me by showing me familiar things. Thanks for the concern. Now shut up and let me work. The hallucinations didn't stop, but Marcus learned to ignore them. When his dead father appeared in the pilot's seat offering advice, Marcus nodded politely and plotted their next course correction. When the ship's corridors turned into the house he grew up in, he navigated by memory and instruments rather than what his eyes told him. On the 4th day, they found it. The Blight Nest ship was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. But unlike any ship Marcus had ever seen, this one seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Parts of it faded in and out of reality. The hull appeared to be made of living tissue, pulsing with an irregular heartbeat that Marcus could feel in his bones. My God, Arya whispered. her voice filled with digital horror. "It's alive." All the intelligence reports said the Blight used biotechnology. Guess they weren't exaggerating. Marcus began scanning the ship for entry points. "Can you detect any life signs?" "Multiple organic signatures, but the readings are confused. It's as if the ship itself is interfering with my sensors." Marcus found what he was looking for. A small breach in the ship's side, probably from some previous battle. It was barely large enough for the Time's Defiance times to fit through, but it would have to do. "Captain, entering that ship would be suicide. We have no information about the internal environment. The air could be toxic, the gravity could be crushing, or worse. There might not be physics as we understand them inside. Only one way to find out." Marcus put on his environmental suit and gathered his equipment. Unlike the high-tech weapons other species preferred, he carried simple, reliable gear. Assault rifle, pistol, combat knife, and a backpack full of old-fashioned explosives. The kind of tools human soldiers had been using for centuries, modified for space combat. "Arya, if I'm not back in 6 hours, return to human space and tell them what we found." "Captain, what makes you think you can succeed where the greatest warriors of other species have failed?" Marcus checked his weapon one more time. "Because they were trying to be heroes. I'm just trying to bring a kid home." The breach led into a corridor that defied description. The walls were made of what looked like flesh, but flesh that had metal cables running through it. The floor was soft under his feet, like walking on a giant tongue. Worse, the corridor seemed to stretch away into infinity in both directions. Marcus pulled out his compass and was surprised when it actually worked. The needle pointed steadily in one direction, which he decided to call north. He began walking, using the old infantry technique of counting steps and time to track his movement. The ship was a maze designed by something that didn't understand human psychology. The corridors split and merged without pattern. Gravity shifted randomly, sometimes pulling him toward the walls or ceiling. But Marcus had trained in urban warfare, where buildings could be just as confusing and deadly. He treated the ship like any other hostile environment. Mark your path, watch for threats, conserve ammunition, and never stop moving forward. The first blight creature he encountered was feeding on a pile of what had once been aliens from a dozen different species. The creature looked like a giant spider made of metal and shadows. When it sensed Marcus, it let out a sound that was part scream and part static. Most species would have tried to communicate with it or use energy weapons. Marcus shot it in what he hoped was its head with his rifle. The creature dropped immediately. "Guess you bleed just like anything else," he muttered. As he moved deeper into the ship, Marcus began to understand how the Blight operated. They were perfect predators for species that relied on advanced technology and psychic abilities. Their chaotic environment disrupted electronic systems and drove telepathic minds insane, but they had never encountered a species that had learned to fight in trenches, caves, and bombed-out cities. A species that had spent thousands of years killing things that were bigger, stronger, and better equipped. Marcus found Princess Kiralyn in the heart of the ship, suspended in what looked like a giant flower made of metal and flesh. Tubes connected to her arms were slowly draining her life force into a pool of glowing liquid below. She was barely conscious, her normally iridescent skin now pale and gray. "Princess?" Marcus checked her pulse, and was relieved to find it steady but weak. "My name is Captain Marcus Chen. Your mother sent me." Kiralyn's eyes opened, and for a moment she stared at him in confusion. "You're human?" "That's right. And I'm here to take you home." Marcus began cutting through the tubes, connecting her to the machine. As soon as they were severed, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The nest ship had detected the damage to its feeding system. "Can you walk?" Kiralyn tried to stand but collapsed. The weeks of captivity and energy drainage had left her too weak to move. Marcus slung her over his shoulder in a fireman's carry and began moving toward the exit. That was when the real fight began. Blight creatures poured into the corridor from every direction. Marcus had faced alien warriors before, but these things were different. They moved with the coordinated precision of a hive mind, and their weapons seemed to be parts of their own bodies. But Marcus had something they didn't expect. He fought dirty. When a creature with blade arms cornered him, he didn't try to match its speed. He threw a concussion grenade and used the explosion to get behind it. When a group of them tried to surround him, he didn't stand his ground like an honorable warrior. He retreated through a hole he'd blown in the wall and picked them off from cover. Human warfare had never been about honor or fair fights. It was about using every advantage you could get and doing whatever it took to protect the people you cared about. As Marcus carried the princess through the twisting corridors, fighting running battles with creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, Kira Lin began to understand something that would change her view of humans forever. This strange, violent species didn't fight to prove their superiority. They fought because they refused to give up. And sometimes, that was enough. Marcus reached the Times Defiance Times with Kira Lin still unconscious over his shoulder, and a dozen blight creatures closing in behind them. The ship's automated systems had detected his approach and lowered the boarding ramp, but he could hear more enemies coming through the corridors above and below. "Area, we need to leave now. Captain." The ship's docking clamps appear to be organic growths that have attached to our hull. "I cannot break free without damaging our engines." Marcus laid Kira Lin gently on the medical bay bed and ran to the bridge. Through the viewports, he could see thick, root-like tendrils that had grown from the nest ship's hull and wrapped around the Times Defiance asterisk. The blight weren't going to let their prize escape easily. "How much explosive do we have left?" Checking inventory. "Approximately 37 kilograms of various demolition charges. Set them all for remote detonation and place them along the docking area. When I give the signal, blow everything at once." Marcus strapped himself into the pilot's seat as Arya's maintenance drones went to work. Behind them, he could hear the blight creatures trying to break through the sealed hatch. The metal was already beginning to glow red from whatever weapons they were using. "Explosives in place, Captain." "Do it." The explosion shook the entire nest ship. The organic clamps holding the Defiance Times disintegrated, and Marcus fired the engines at full power. They shot out of the breach in the hull, just as a massive blight hunter-killer emerged from another part of the ship. But Marcus had one more surprise waiting. During his infiltration of the nest ship, he had planted additional charges throughout the feeding chambers and what looked like nursery areas. Nuclear devices, crude but effective, modified with materials from the ship itself to create maximum disruption. "Area, send the detonation signal." "Captain." "Are you certain?" "The explosion will likely destroy the entire nest ship." "That's the idea." The nuclear explosives weren't just bombs. Marcus had learned enough about the Blight's biotechnology to know they were vulnerable to specific types of radiation. The dirty bombs he'd created would not only destroy the ship but send psychic shockwaves throughout the dead zone, disrupting every Blight presence in the region. The nest ship died like a living thing, screaming across multiple dimensions as it collapsed in on itself. The explosion created a chain reaction that lit up the entire dead zone with unnatural fire. For the first time in centuries, the void between galaxies was briefly free of the Blight's influence. As they escaped into hyperspace, Marcus finally allowed himself to relax. They were alive, they had the princess, and they were heading home. Then Arya's voice cut through his relief. "Captain, Princess Kira Lin is awake and requesting to speak with you." Marcus found the princess sitting up in the medical bay, looking much better after the ship's basic medical systems had treated her injuries. Her skin was beginning to regain some of its natural iridescence, though she was still clearly weak. "You came for me," she said simply. "Why?" Marcus sat down across from her. "Your mother asked for help, but your people owe us nothing. The Velnari have never offered humans anything but polite dismissal. We've always considered your species too young, too primitive to be true partners in galactic affairs. Maybe we are primitive, but that doesn't mean we don't help when someone's in trouble." Kira Lin studied him with eyes that seemed to see more than just the physical. "May I ask you something personal?" Marcus nodded. "During our escape, I was barely conscious, but I could sense your emotions. You weren't fighting for glory or reward. You were fighting with the same fury I've only felt from Velnari parents protecting their children. Do you have children, Captain?" "No. Never married, never had kids. The military life doesn't leave much time for that." "Then why did you fight for me like I was your own daughter?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Because someone had to, and because no one else would try." "That's not an answer." Marcus stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. When I was a kid, maybe 8 years old, I got lost in the woods near my home. Spent 3 days out there, scared and alone. A stranger found me, a man I'd never met, and he carried me home. Didn't know my name, didn't know my family, but he spent hours searching just because a kid was in trouble. He turned back to face her. That's what humans do, Princess. We look out for each other, even when it doesn't make sense. Even when there's no reward, maybe especially then. Kiralyn tried to reach out with her telepathic abilities to better understand this strange human, but she encountered something she'd never experienced before. His mind wasn't closed to her, exactly, but it was protected, where Velnari minds were like open gardens that shared everything. His was like a fortress designed to keep precious things safe inside. I can't read your thoughts, she said. Most aliens can't. We're not telepathic like you. But that doesn't mean we don't feel things just as deeply. Over the next few days of their journey back to Velnari space, Kiralyn learned more about humans from the ship's database and from talking with Marcus. She discovered a species that was younger and less technologically advanced than hers, but possessed something remarkable. They never gave up. She read about human history, about wars fought against impossible odds, about explorations into unknown territories where death was almost certain, about ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply because they were needed. Your people are fascinating, she told Marcus as they neared home. You have no psychic abilities, no naturally advanced technology, and yet you've spread across dozens of star systems in just a few centuries. We're stubborn, Marcus said with a smile. It's our best and worst quality. No, it's something more than that. I've been studying your military tactics, your exploration patterns, your first contact protocols. Other species expand through careful planning and technological superiority. Humans expand through hope. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Hope? You attempt things that other species wouldn't try because the risk of failure is too high. But humans seem to believe that if something is important enough, the risk doesn't matter. You'll try anyway. As they approached the Velnari homeworld, Marcus received a communication from Arya. Captain, we're being hailed by Queen Zixthara herself. The Queen's image appeared on the main screen, and Marcus was struck by how much she resembled her daughter. But where Kiralyn's skin shimmered with youth and health, the Queen's was dulled by grief and exhaustion. Captain Chen. The Queen's voice was filled with emotion that needed no translation. Is she? She's safe, Your Majesty. Weak but recovering. We'll be landing in about an hour. Queen Zixthara closed her eyes, and tears began to stream down her face. When she opened them again, there was something new there. A look of wonder and gratitude that Marcus had never seen from an alien leader. Captain, my daughter tells me you refused any reward for this mission. That's right. May I ask what you want from us? There must be something. Marcus thought about that for a moment. Respect, he said finally. Not for me, but for my species. We may be young and we may be primitive by your standards, but we're here to stay. And we'd rather be partners than servants. The Queen was silent for a long moment. Captain Chen, do you realize what you've accomplished? You've done something that the greatest warriors of a dozen species said was impossible. You've struck a blow against the blight that they may never recover from. And you've shown my people that there are forms of strength we never understood. As the Defiance Times began its final approach to the Crystal Palace, Marcus looked over at Kiralyn, who had insisted on being on the bridge to see their homecoming. She was staring at her homeworld with tears in her eyes, but she was also watching Marcus with something that looked like new understanding. Captain, she said quietly, when I tell my people about what happened, when I tell them about humans, what should I say? Marcus smiled as the beautiful crystal towers of the Velnari capital came into view. Tell them we're the species that shows up when everyone else goes home. And tell them that sometimes, that's enough. The Crystal Palace had never seen anything like the crowds that gathered to witness Princess Kiralyn's return. Millions of Velnari lined the approach to the landing platform, their combined telepathic voices creating a song of joy that could be felt across the planet. The crystal towers themselves glowed with brilliant colors, reflecting the overwhelming happiness of an entire civilization. Queen Zixthara stood at the center of the landing platform, surrounded by the highest nobles of her court. But Marcus could see that she only had eyes for the ship carrying her daughter. Her hands trembled as the Time's Defiance Times settled onto the crystal surface with barely a whisper of sound. The boarding ramp lowered, and Marcus stepped out first, followed closely by Princess Kiralyn. She was still weak from her ordeal, but she had insisted on walking off the ship under her own power. The moment Queen Zixthara saw her daughter, she broke into a run. Kiralyn, the princess, ran into her mother's arms, and the force of their reunion sent a wave of pure emotion rippling across the planet. Every Velnari felt it through their shared consciousness. Relief, joy, love, and gratitude so powerful it brought tears to their eyes. "Mother, he rescued me," Kiralyn said, her voice breaking as she held her mother tight. "The human warrior came into the dead zone and brought me home." Queen Zixthara looked over her daughter's shoulder at Marcus, who was standing quietly by his ship, clearly uncomfortable with all the attention. The queen gently released Kiralyn and walked toward him, her steps measured and formal. "Captain Marcus Chen," she said, and her voice carried across the entire platform. "You have done something that every military leader in the galaxy said was impossible. You ventured into the dead zone, faced the blight swarm alone, and brought my daughter safely home." Marcus stood at attention. "Just doing my job, Your Majesty." "No," the queen said firmly. "This was far more than duty. You risked your life for someone you had never met, from a species that had never shown yours proper respect." "Why?" The entire crowd fell silent, waiting for his answer. Marcus looked out at the sea of alien faces. All turned toward him with expressions of curiosity and wonder. Behind them, the crystal towers caught the light of 3 suns, creating a rainbow of colors across the sky. "Because it was the right thing to do," Marcus said simply. "Sometimes that's reason enough." Queen Zixthara studied him for a long moment, then did something that shocked everyone present. She knelt before the human warrior. "Captain Chen, in the name of the Velnari Empire, I formally apologize for the way we have treated your species. We believe that age and psychic ability were the measures of a civilization's worth. You have shown us that there are other kinds of strength, other forms of wisdom." She stood and gestured to her court. "We offer you anything within our power to grant: psychic enhancement crystals, advanced technology, territory in our space, even marriage to Princess Kiralyn if you desire it." Marcus glanced at Kiralyn, who was turning several interesting shades of purple with embarrassment. "That's very generous, Your Majesty, but I have to decline." "All of it?" "All of it. Well, maybe not the crystal technology. My people could probably use that. But I don't want anything for myself." Queen Zixthara looked confused. "Then what do you want?" Marcus stepped forward, his expression serious. "I want a partnership. Not humans serving aliens, or aliens helping primitive humans out of pity. Real partnership, between species that respect each other." "You have it," the queen said immediately. "But surely there must be something else? Some personal reward?" Marcus smiled. "Your daughter is safe, Your Majesty. That's reward enough." Princess Kiralyn stepped forward. "Mother, during our journey home, I learned something important about humans. They don't do great deeds for glory or payment. They do them because someone needs help, and they refuse to accept that any situation is hopeless." She turned to address the gathered crowd. "I have seen the galaxy's greatest warriors turn away from impossible odds. I have watched advanced civilizations declare problems unsolvable and abandon those in need. But this human came alone into the worst place in the galaxy, armed with primitive weapons and powered by nothing but determination." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. "He didn't save me because I'm a princess. He didn't save me because his people owed mine a debt. He saved me because I needed saving, and that was enough for him. This is what humans do. This is who they are." The crowd erupted in cheers, and Marcus felt something he'd never experienced before. The telepathic approval of an entire civilization washing over him like warm sunlight. It didn't hurt or feel invasive like he'd expected. Instead, It felt like being welcomed into the largest family in the galaxy. Queen Zixthara raised her hand for silence. Captain Chen, I want you to know that this partnership goes beyond our two species. Word of what you've accomplished is already spreading across the galaxy. The species that dismissed humanity as too young and primitive are having to reconsider. She gestured to a group of beings standing at the edge of the platform. Marcus recognized representatives from several major civilizations. The Crystalline Nexus Guild, the Ancient Ethereal Collective, even the proud Draconian Empire. They all want to meet you, Captain, to understand how your species accomplished what theirs could not. Marcus looked at the alien diplomats, then back at the Queen. What should I tell them? Tell them the truth, Princess Kirillin said. Tell them that humans don't have the strongest weapons or the most advanced technology. Tell them that you don't have psychic powers or energy shields or dimensional travel. But tell them that you have something else. You never give up. Queen Zixthara nodded. My daughter is right. In our long history, the Velnari have seen many species rise and fall. Some were destroyed by enemies, others collapsed under their own corruption, and still others simply faded away when they lost the will to struggle against adversity. She placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. But humans are different. You face impossible odds and try anyway. You encounter problems with no clear solution, and keep working until you find one. You meet strangers in need, and help them even when there's no benefit to yourselves. Marcus felt uncomfortable with all the praise. We're not perfect, Your Majesty. Humans have done plenty of terrible things throughout our history. So have all species, the Queen replied. The difference is that humans learn from their mistakes and try to do better. That may be the most important quality any species can have. As the ceremony concluded and the crowds began to disperse, Marcus prepared to return to his ship. He had been given formal documents establishing the new Human-Velnari alliance, along with samples of psychic enhancement crystals that Earth scientists would spend decades studying. Princess Kirillin approached him one last time. Captain, I have something for you. She handed him a small crystal pendant that glowed with soft blue light. This is a memory crystal. It contains my experiences from the rescue. From my perspective, I want your people to understand what they accomplished through you. Marcus accepted the pendant. Thank you, Princess. For what it's worth, I think the galaxy is going to be a better place with humans and Velnari working together. I agree. And Captain, when you get home, tell your people something for me. What's that? Tell them that the galaxy has been waiting for them without knowing it. We've been waiting for a species that believes in hope when logic says there is none. A species that thinks impossible just means no one has done it yet. As Marcus walked back to his ship, he passed groups of Velnari who bowed respectfully as he went by. Children reached out to touch his hand, as if hoping some of his courage would transfer to them. Adults looked at him with expressions of wonder and gratitude. Back on the Times, Defiance *, Arya was waiting with a communication from Earth Command. Admiral Rodriguez appeared on the screen. Her expression, unreadable. Marcus, I don't know whether to court-martial you or recommend you for the highest honors in the fleet. How about neither? Marcus suggested. I just want to come home. You can't. Not yet. The diplomatic corps is going crazy. Every major species in the galaxy wants to meet with humanity now. They want to know how we accomplished what they couldn't. You've opened doors that we've been trying to pry open for decades. Marcus sighed. So what now? Now you come home and help us figure out how to live up to the reputation you've created. The galaxy expects great things from humanity now, Marcus. Think we can deliver? Marcus looked out at the Crystal Palace, where Princess Kirillin was standing on her balcony, waving goodbye. He thought about the Blight Nest ship burning in the dead zone, about the impossible mission that had become possible through nothing but human stubbornness. Yeah, Admiral, I think we can. As the Defiance Times lifted off from the Velnari homeworld and headed for home, Marcus reflected on what had changed. Humanity was no longer the young species begging for acceptance at the edges of galactic civilization. They were partners, allies, friends, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other species were learning a new truth. that the scrappy, stubborn humans from the third planet of an unremarkable star system had something special to offer the galaxy. They had hope, and sometimes that was enough to change everything.